Hello viewers, Super GT here. This is the final round of the Nations Cup, so let's jump in. I've only got one chance to get this right. I was away for round 5 and 6, and so we need to have a good score here in round number 7, the final round. And to begin with, of course, we jump into the warm-up. Now this is normally not too important, but for me it was, because I hadn't done any prior practice to this event, and I did not do any of the earlier races. And this actually gave me a very good chance to get acclimatized to this track once again, Grand Valley Highway. Now weirdly, this practice, this warm-up went on for ages. There was a bit of a problem with someone lagging, and to be fair, the servers are quite bad at the moment. So this session actually went on for about 15 or 16 minutes in the end. Yes! The warm-up is complete. Okay, this is important. Well, it's nearly a 1 hour race, so it's not as important, but still important. It's important. Qualifying is important. We've got to get this right. Even if it is a 30 lap race. So it's going to be near enough an hour, or just under an hour long. Qualifying is still going to be important. You know, you don't want to have to fight through too many cars and use up your tyres and burn your fuel. And so these laps right here, I had to get them dead right. Now luckily for me, I think Grand Valley Highway is one of the tracks I'm better at compared to the others, and so I feel quite comfortable around here. Coming down the hill, you can go flat out, especially on soft tyres, fresh soft tyres here. Of course, watch out for the track limits, especially on that left-hander. Into the hairpin, coming off that brake, letting the car roll, then back on the power in second gear. Then you've got this very twisty and very quite technical actually middle sector. This double left, always quite tricky to get dead right. Back on the power as early as you can, let the car run wide, and then here is a case of just rolling the speed through, letting the car rotate, back on the power, and then getting a decent exit. The Super in front was really quick. I mean, this guy was super fast, and sometimes it's quite hard to tell if, is that just me being slow? You know, is everyone in this lobby that quick, or is that guy just, he's like the quickest guy in the lobby and I just happen to be behind him, making me look bad, making me feel bad, but really, actually, I'm not doing too bad. I guess we'll find out. That's the whole point of qualifying, to decide who is good and who is bad. Into this final sequence, this corner here, really important to get a good exit. You are flat out from here all the way to the braking zone of the first corner. Coming into the tunnel, into the darkness, and then turn pretty much straight away. It's quite hard to get that turning point dead right, as you can't always see, adjusting to the light. And as we cross the line, it's going to be a 1:46.4, half a second off that Super in front, who was really quick, but it did put me in a good position. P2 at the time of doing the lap, and a couple of people also completed their laps, and I didn't really move down the order much more. Down to third by this point, 8 tenths off the pole position time. Ultimately, I finished in a solid P4. Fourth on the grid. That guy on pole is very quick. Right, this is going to be a very long race. Medium tyres to begin with. Then we'll jump onto I think it's a 2-stop race. Alright, last race of the season. Let's have a good one. I think these Supras are going to be really hard to overtake. I've got a Supra right behind me as well. A couple of Alphas. It's interesting to see this Alpha being used. I think it's very much a handling car. Alright, let's do it. Here we go, guys. Round number 7, the final round of the Nations Cup. I have one shot to get this race right. Let's go for it. Let's get a good result and see what we can do. Let's try and ease into the race nice and gently. We don't need to go too crazy too soon. 30 laps to do. And so this is very much an endurance race. Earlier in the season, of course, that Spa race I mentioned earlier, that was also a very long race, 24 laps I think that was, and that was near enough an hour as well. And I really enjoyed that endurance format, the longer race, one where you can settle down, get into a good rhythm. And it's all about consistency, managing your tyres, managing your brakes, not really managing your brakes, managing your fuel, but not to a ridiculous amount. You kind of just have to drive nicely, consistently. And I enjoyed that aspect. So let's see if that is going to have an effect on this one. A similar length of race, starting from P4 on this occasion. Now we're starting on the medium tyre, the slower of the two available. You do have to use the medium and the soft. and we're going to go with the slower tyre to begin with, trying to work out who's on what tyre at the beginning. Now it looks like at least the leader was really quick in that qualifying session, 8/10 quicker than me, so it's going to be really tricky to keep up with that guy and win, but we'll see what we can do. Now my first, I would say, worry on this initial opening lap here was that of the Supra immediately behind me. And coming onto this straight, this is going to be a crucial moment because that Supra is so damn fast in a straight line that this phase of the lap is incredibly important. I'm somewhat in the slipstream of the Alpha in front. That Alpha seemed to have really good traction out of the slow corners, and it will just pull away at the beginning of the straight. But at the end of the straight here, you can see the Supra coming right at me. He's going to move to the right-hand side and go for the inside. And now that he's there, I can't really do too much other than try it around the outside. And to be fair to him, he hasn't run me wide, given me the space, and I've managed to keep the position by running that one around the outside. So good battling there. However, this race is in danger of becoming one where I go backwards rather than forwards. So I need to be really careful here. I don't make any silly mistakes. Go a little bit deep into this hairpin. As you can see on the radar, there are 3 cars waiting to quite happily take my position off my hands. And so I need to really make sure this is a race where I look forward, go forward, gain positions, and not get caught up in a battle with the cars behind. So far we're doing an okay job, but if I remain too close to these guys behind, especially the guy in the Supra, then there's a very good chance I get overtaken. So these sectors here are crucial. I need to really make sure I get a good run through these turns, make the most of the GTR's strength, which is the handling, especially for these sort of medium and high speed corners. Now luckily for me, the 2 guys behind actually got a penalty. There was an Alpha and that Supra. That opened up the gap, and that was really good for me. I didn't have to worry then about being overtaken. I could just focus on catching up with the Shadow 977, the Finnish driver here in the Alpha. And you know, the Alpha's not a car that I've really raced against a huge amount. The GTR, the Supra have been sort of the go-to cars really in Group 3 for quite a while. And so it was interesting to see a different car being used, and of course just trying to work out its strengths. And I think its main one, as I kind of touched upon earlier, the traction coming out of these slower corners was really good. However, on this occasion I was more than close enough to at least consider an overtake towards turn 1. So let's see how this goes. Make sure we don't get this final corner wrong. Carry the speed as much as possible into the slipstream. It has pretty decent straight line speed, at least compared to the Nissan GTR here. Fully in the slipstream. He's not going to fight this one. And so as we look up to the inside, got to try and judge this braking point dead right. And if anything, a little bit too late. And he's going to perform the classic old switcheroo. So now coming down the hill side by side, this is not an ideal place to run side by side. I was very conscious of that Supra coming up behind, so I thought I'm going to back out here, play the long game, play it sensible, not do anything too stupid. Time loss is so important in a race like this. We do not want to be losing unnecessary seconds squabbling when we really don't need to. So ideally I would have just got that move done properly, but we're going to try again. Over the next couple of laps, it was a case of just trying to run as close to this guy as I possibly could on this final sector. Easier said than done because he was very good out of the slow corners. On this occasion, I wasn't quite as close to go for this move, so I thought, you know what? I feel like I'm slightly quicker than this guy, even though I am in the toe, which does affect that, but I felt like, okay, I'm just going to stay behind for the time being. He's quick enough that I'm not going to get easily overtaken by the guy behind. You can see here, not quite close enough on that lap because he got a really good exit onto the straight. But remained behind. This is lap number 8 now. We're getting well into this race, nearly at third distance. And as I said, trying to keep close through this final sector of the lap onto the bridge, and then towards this final sequence of corners. Looking for this 100 board, the last board at the right, on the left, going into this right, and just trying to be as close as possible. And then it's really about this exit. Can we get a good line through here? Just rising 2 wheels onto the curb, and getting a bit of an oversteer moment. 3 tenths behind. can this be a potential overtake then into the first corner? It looks like the top two are both on the soft tyre. In fact, the guy in second does go into the pit lane with the soft tyre. So that's the reason why they were pulling away. They were on the better tyre and probably driving a bit better. Across the line we go. We are going to go for the overtake this time around. And let's try not to overcook it this time around. Look at this. Just keep it nicely pinned on the apex, preventing that old switcheroo. And eventually here, at the beginning of lap number 9, getting the overtake done. So playing this one nice and patient. It's 15 minutes into the race now. Being nice and patient, getting the job done when required. We could have got it done maybe on lap 4. Overcooked it. But eventually, we find ourselves now in second with the Croatian driver in the Supra, who was in second, pitting. And so this is always an interesting aspect of these races where you are racing against people that you can't always see, but you just have to keep the pace and consistency up, knowing that at the end of the race it will all come together and hopefully you'll find yourself, well, in first place ideally, but we'll find out. Through this left, maximising the track on the left beyond the white line, into this right, accelerating before you get to that change of tarmac onto this bridge to get a good run onto this straight section. Now you can see already beginning to edge clear here of the Alpha. The Supra in the lead, the Spaniard goes into the pit lane, and so at the beginning of lap number 10 I take the lead of the race. End of lap 11 now, the front left tyre beginning to really drop off, and I think the guy behind in the Alpha was beginning to drop off his pace. Now beginning to struggle, nearly 2 seconds behind, and as we look behind you can see him just pulling over to the right hand side into the pit lane. And just take a look at that front left, not too good shape, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to play the long game once again. You know, this is a long race, trying to play the long game, and I'm going to do one lap extra. I'm going to try and eke out a long stint here on the medium that gives me fresher and better tyres later in the race on the soft tyre, being sure to not run wide on the track limits here on the pit entry. Do not want to get ourselves a 3-second penalty for that. So over to the soft tyre. We are going to do another pit stop later in the race, and so we don't have to refuel just yet. Let's keep the car nice and light for as long as possible. So let's take a look at this situation. We are, well, a good gap behind the first two, the Spaniard and the Croatian driver, well around the hairpin now. And then in third place I have another Supra driven by the Polish driver. He's the guy who tried to go past me on lap number 2 but didn't quite make it happen, and he's obviously managed to get a sizable undercut on me by pitting a bit earlier. However, I'm pretty sure he was on the medium tyre, and I was able to work that out because of this lap here. Just look at the delta, the time delta between us. I know the GTR is quicker through this part of the track, but I was able just to take a tenth away pretty much on every corner through this part of the track. And Grand Valley, very tight in this middle sector, and so that's where the handling cars are really going to be strong. And therefore in this lap I've managed to gain about half a second already. So I'm pretty sure that I was on the better tyre. This guy doing his medium stint now, and so just trying to catch up, reel him in, and over the course of a couple of laps here I managed to put in a 46.7 on lap 14. That was my best lap to date. And by lap 15, as we can see here, beginning to get to the back of this guy. And as I touched upon briefly earlier, I felt as though overtaking a Supra is going to be very difficult. Of course, he doesn't quite have the grip, so this overtake would probably have to catch him by surprise and get him unawares somewhere. It's not going to happen on the main straight because that car will just drive away from me. And so it's quite clear at this point here that I have a tyre advantage, whatever that is, whether he's on the medium or he's on very worn softs. He seems to not really be able to drive that car too quickly. So it goes somewhat defensive here into the tunnel. Am I able to go around the outside of him here cleanly? I am, in fact, able to do that. So massive tyre advantage. So we get that position. He wanted to defend it, and I felt, you know what? No thank you. I'm just going to do around the outside, take the position back, and move on with my race. Now, quite interestingly, sorry, as we look behind here, I tried to break the toe, but he was going over to the right-hand side anyway because he was going to the pit lane. He was indeed on soft tyres. They must have been incredibly worn because he had no pace at all there. And so I can now turn my attention to the cars in front. Now, interestingly, the Shadow, the Finnish driver, is many seconds behind. The guy in second is 8 seconds in front. And as you can see, well around the corner, he's at the hairpin now as I'm heading down the hill. And let's take another look at the time delta between the two of us, as this is what I'm really looking at during this race, just to work out what this gap is, work out what tyre this guy is on. So we know when he first pitted he was on the soft tyre, so he still has to use the medium at some point, and I'm trying to work out if he's doing that right now or if he's going to do it at the end. Now, it's my initial thought that most people would not want to end the race on the medium tyre. You kind of want to end the race on the best tyre to give yourself the best ammunition in a fight if there needs to be one. Now, after a couple of laps, as you can see, I was reeling them in quite quickly here. The gap now 3 seconds, and then by the end of lap 20 it was less than 1 second, and eventually it was actually the battle for the lead as we begin lap 21, because the Spaniard had gone in from his medium stint and would then go on to the softs. So here, as we end this stint, we are within the last 2 laps of this middle stint of the race, the second stint. This was quite an important phase because I felt like, well, if this guy is on the mediums, we're both going to go onto the soft for the end of this race, and therefore it's going to be a very direct battle between the two of us for this position, which at the moment is the lead of the race. This is the direct battle for first. However, it looked like the Spaniard is rather clear, so this is really a battle for second. And so, can I spring a surprise here, get this position before the pit stop? I always like to do that, get an overtake done just before the pit stop, just to secure your position. And here I decided to dive up the inside, take a nice narrow line. There's a tiny bump there, but I think it was just about passable, and I'm able to hang it around the outside here into this right-hander and just about get the position. And so, with the intention of going into the pit lane at the end of this lap, our front left tyre is really beginning to die of death. I think that was a very timely and beneficial overtake, as it will just give us the track position, and it will mean that I won't have to try and overtake that Supra later, which could become harder. I feel like the best time to overtake that Supra is when it's weak, when it's on bad tyres, and not when it's on good tyres. It'll be really tricky to do that. So here we go then, at the end of lap number 21, pulling into the pit lane for our second stop. Oh my god, guys, this is a nerve-wracking race. I really can't work out what position I'm going to be in at the end. Should be a podium, but it could be a second. Indeed, it would be a second Super GT, as the leader is 13 seconds ahead. That's going to be unlikely to change. That Spaniard was so quick, really quick. Like, I don't even know if he could make it in the top split. Maybe he's probably quick enough for that. But in terms of my personal battle, leaving the pit lane here in second with a 1.4 second advantage over the Croatian driver that we just overtook. So this is now pretty much a direct fight to the end of the race. No pit stops required from here on in. And my main concern really is letting that Supra get into the slipstream range. So that was the main thing I was really considering here. If that Supra gets within half a second of me going onto that back straight, I'm pretty much toast. There's not going to be a lot I can do to keep him behind. So this is the beginning of lap 24, and he was actually reeling me in. So at this point here, 0.6 seconds the gap. So he was just chipping away a little bit here and there, and I wasn't really able to do too much about it. The thing I really had to do was tidy up my middle sector. So once again, let's take a look at that time delta between the two of us. This was so important. I really needed to make sure this gap came up from 0.5. If it stayed at 0.5 by the time we got back onto the main straight, as I said, I would be toast, and he would come flying past. There'd be nothing I can do about it other than punt him into oblivion. But that is typically frowned upon in racing. So let's see if we can take a nice middle sector here. It's really about, again, maximising the strength of the car. This car is good through this middle sequence. At least it is over the Supra. So I need to really make sure that this gap comes up. Taking a nice couple of lines here. I do feel comfortable around this Grand Valley Highway 1 circuit. The gap up to 0.9, so we've gained about 4/10 on this lap. And we gain a little bit more, hopefully, through these last couple of corners. Trail braking into the bridge, into the tunnel, sorry, off of the bridge. And then you have this tight left-right chicane to round out the lap, or pretty much round out the lap. The gap goes up to just above 1 second, and that's the place I need it to be. From that far back, well, he's too far back to get an overtake done into turn 1. So I'm fairly safe. A 46.1 across the line there. That's my fastest lap of the race, so that's good timing, you know. A good time at a good time. And it's only 4/10 away from the Spaniard in the lead, so I'm pretty happy with it. This is the end of lap 26, as we are nearing the end of the race. 0.7 the gap. He's definitely in the slipstream, and it's really ominous looking in that mirror and seeing a Supra on a straight, knowing there's not much I can do if he gets any closer. On this occasion, I've done enough. He's not close enough to get the move done. However, the gap does come down to 0.2 of a second. I go a little bit wide through turn 1, and he's able to take a much better line and gain on me massively. So here, looking at that radar, he's very close, so I think I'm going to have to go somewhat defensive here. Back him up a little bit, take a really slow apex, and then just start off. And then actually open up that gap sizably by a few tenths, just by tactically sort of delaying my acceleration. And now once again, it's that little set piece scenario. Go and set a quick middle sector, open up that gap. Don't really worry about him for the moment, just get this middle sector done. And open up that gap once more. 0.8 the gap, it actually has improved. So I know that the longer this race goes on, the worse his tyres get, the more of a chance I stand of trying to fight against him. And so I need to delay this as much as possible. I need to really push him back as far as I can, and he has actually made a bit of a mistake on this lap, perhaps pushing a bit too hard, getting into the dirty air. Gap comes up to near enough a second. Unfortunately for me, that was about as close as he got until the last couple of laps. The last lap, I would actually say. We'll see that in just a moment. So across the line we go, 1.1 the gap now, as we still set a 46. So the tyres are just beginning to really drop off by this point. But with 2 laps to go, unfortunately I make a mistake here. Really annoying. My first penalty in the entire race, 50 minutes into the race. The half-second penalty for the exit of that final chicane, which is really annoying, because it's quite unclear exactly where that track limit is. Fortunately enough for me, I managed to create enough of a gap that it didn't mean that he could overtake me. However, he did get a bit closer, but not close enough to get in the slipstream and go for this move. So in this final stint of the race, it was really a case of being very consistent under a decent amount of pressure and just keeping this guy at arm's length. And 54.5 minutes later, I was very happily enough able to bring this home in P2. I was really happy with that. This race could have gone backwards, but ultimately second place. Get in there, Lewis. I know that's not a win, but P2 with minimal practice. I did like 5 laps practice and 1 attempt to get it right. P2, happy with that. 304 points there to round off the season. That's a pretty good score. Anything above 300 is good for me. Okay guys, let's take a look at the final standings of the season. How have I done? There I am, 66th. Has to be the sixes, right? Total points 917, averaged above 300, which is good for me. In the UK, let's take a look. I finished 13th in the UK. You know what? I think that's not too bad. I did miss 2 of the rounds. But well done to all the qualifiers. They'll be going to Amsterdam for the World Series Showdown in August. Hopefully I can make it to that event. It'll be great to see some of you out there. But in the meantime, have an amazing day. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.